All right, great. It looks like everything is working. Welcome, Wolanklin. I am so excited to have you be a part of this class. I'm jumping in a little bit early because I am modeling for you one of the things that we're going to talk about today. This is a new technology for me because I wanted to get something that I could share my screen with you and show you all the cool things that we got going on today in this class. So I'm in here testing everything and making sure that everything's going well. And I hope that with everything set up, that I'll be able to also see all of your comments while I'm sharing my screen too. So fingers crossed. As you're jumping in, leave in the comments below. Can you see me? Can you hear me? And is everything going just fine and dandy for you? Let me see here. Looks good. All right, I see we got some people in here. Let me know that you can see and hear everything so that I know everything's going well. Oh, so excited for this. How are you doing? When does back to school start for you too? I know a lot of y'all are starting pretty close. Whew. I heard a lot of people are starting August 17th. That was a really popular number. And some districts even pushed it back to September 8th. So what we're going to be talking about today is I'm actually going to be showing you a real section. This is a sample lesson from the course that's opening up tomorrow. And it is from the module that's all about remote learning. And this section for remote learning, we're going to talk today about the 10 lessons that I learned while remote learning and how to use those 10 lessons that I made to make your decisions better for yourself. How to set up for success. So let's talk about here today. What is your goal when it comes to remote learning? What are you trying to achieve with this? And I'm going to tell you that we are here today to talk about the idea that you are overwhelmed with the possibilities right now, not the lack of options. And that can be detrimental in itself. You don't need to know it all. You just need to know enough to make good choices. You're going to have so many different options. Your district is going to present to you a lot of different options probably, and you're going to find and curate lots of different options. But the reality is that you don't need to be an expert at everything to still make good choices that will be good for your students. So what we're going to talk about today is how to make those good decisions using some mistakes that I made when we closed down schools last March, and how that's going to work well for your students. So let's talk first about what are those systems and resources that are going to work well for you. Because really, there's a lot out there, and not all of it is for you. You're not going to rise to the level of your goals. You are going to fall to the level of your systems. A small percentage of your students are going to need all of your attention, and the rest really don't. So in order to give the attention that all of those students deserve, it really has to do with how well are your systems set up. Systems are going to set you up for success so much more than any individual program will. Like the big chatter and talk around everything that has to do with virtual learning really is like, what's the best program? How do I know if I'm doing this right? And all of that good stuff. And those are valid questions to ask. But honestly, at the end of the day, your systems are what matter, because your systems are what's going to make everything sustainable about your teaching practice. So what I mean by the idea is that I want you to keep in mind that only a small percentage of your students are going to need all of that love and attention that you got. The rest of them, they're probably going to do all right on their own because they have plenty of other teachers to take care of them as well. Something I want you to think about too is that how you front load the beginning of your semester is going to determine how the rest is going to go. So the first beginning part is going to be a lot of work. And then as you move through the semester, you're going to be able to look back on the first 2 weeks and get over that whole initial, okay, I got through the going back to school and now I can figure out whether this system works well or not. But once you have a good system in place, you can make that choice. So don't be married to any specific idea. You can always change it later. But something that I do see that a lot of teachers do is that they don't want to completely go all in on a system. So they have like 6 set up in front of them. Like, I want to try this for a few days and try this for a few days and try this for a few days. Give something a fair shot. And then if it doesn't work, feel free to scrap it. So don't be married to an idea, but do give it some time to see if it works. So here are the rules to live by. I told you today we're going to be talking about 10 things that I learned while remote teaching last semester. And these are going to work for different mediums. Maybe you are completely synchronous teaching. That is what I did. Maybe you are asynchronously teaching. I did asynchronous teaching. Maybe you're doing a hybrid. Maybe you're doing some sort of mix, or maybe you are present in the classroom this semester. Everything's going to look different. And this is going to be a whole first year teacher experience for all of us. So you're going to need some time to figure out a groove. Keep it simple because you can always add things later. What I say to you, I want you to choose things that really only speak to you. That's why there's 10, because everything's going to look different. So depending on what your situation is at your school, pick what really resonates with you, right? And I want to make this very clear. I already know that you live for your students' experience. I already know that the reason that you're here during your summer and your back to school time, taking the time for this class, is because you care a lot about your students' experience. So that's a given. That is an absolute given for this class. So we're not going to talk today about your students. We're talking about you, because you as an educator are barraged with constant messages of what are you doing for your students? How much are you sacrificing? All of that. You hear it everywhere, right? It's exhausting. You and I both know that you live and breathe your students' experience every day. So I'm going to be the person who sticks up for you today and say, we're going to make this work for you. Because when things work better for you, you can serve your students better. So today we're going to talk about some really good systems and ideas that I learned by picking some bad systems so that you can serve your students well. Some mistakes that I learned from, and some good things, so that your remote teaching experience can be awesome. This, I'm sure, is something that you figured out if you taught last semester, but it's worth repeating. Assign less. Assign less than you think you need to. It's very important that you understand that what goes on in a home environment, or even just with a digital resource in a classroom environment, is very different than the traditional model than we're used to. I saw somewhere earlier that it's what's going on right now in the 2020 school experience is not really just converting paper to digital resources. We are rethinking everything about how we teach, and that is very true. And students are feeling that. They are having to reshape everything about how they learn, and that's a difficult process. My golden rule for when you're assigning something is give it 3 times as much time as it takes in class. So if you can assume that it would take about 30 minutes to do something in a controlled classroom environment, then give a student 90 minutes to do it. Or if your classes are a 90-minute block, give them 3 blocks to do it, 3 full days. Because you need to step into your students' shoes here a little bit. Just as we all had a lot of issues with working from home, with screaming children running around and dogs barking at every single package at the door, and trying to figure out why on earth it takes you so long to prepare your own lunch when you used to pack it at 10 minutes in the morning. Or maybe that was just me during virtual learning and teaching from home. I don't know. But it's a bunch of constant chaos learning in a home environment. There are so many variables. And you know what it's like to be a middle schooler or a teenager. They have hidden Xboxes everywhere. Their friends are constantly texting them. Their phone's going off all the time. They have enough trouble concentrating in your classroom. How do you think they feel in their home environment where there's so much going on? You cannot expect them to do the same amount of work. So assign a little bit less than you're used to. And since I told you we're talking today about your experience, assign less on yourself. Please assign less on yourself. If you are teaching from home, or if you are teaching remotely from your classroom, that experience is going to be very different. It's going to take you time to figure out a groove. So give yourself a 20% time buffer. Leave some white space in your schedule. So if you're looking at, maybe you have a PD day where you have like 4 hours free where you're allowed to do what you need to do in your classroom, give yourself a little bit of time just to do whatever you need to do. Maybe plan 3 hours of that time and leave 1 hour for buffer time. Please assign less on yourself. Everything that's going on right now just is a little bit weightier and takes a little bit more time to get used to. And that's okay. Because think about what it would be like if everything was going at a normal pace. Don't you think that would be weird? Give yourself less. And also, you're not going to be able to achieve the same types of things as you can in the classroom because just everything about your environment and routine is different. So give yourself some grace. I also think that we should keep in mind 2 more things when it comes to assigning less to students. They're going to rewatch content. This is a lesson I definitely learned the hard way, is that students took longer than expected to work on assignments because they were constantly rewatching content. Like if I made a video or anything along those lines, or if I gave them some Google Slides to work with, they rewatched it. So give them some time to do that because yes, you want them to be all up in that content. That's great. Also, be mindful of other teachers. This is coming more easily to others. You know, some people are really doing their best to give students as much time as they need to do assignments. And some teachers are really struggling with how much is an appropriate amount of work to put on students. I know that in my area in Charleston, this is something that was talked about a lot from both the parent and student perspective. That was some immediate feedback that we got during the first and second week of school closures, is that students had too much to do. And it was from every single school. So it was pretty much across the board. So that's something that we as teachers need to watch, is that maybe not everybody's really on the same page as us. I know y'all are killing it, but maybe your colleague, you know, across the way, virtually, they might be assigning a lot of work to your students. So be mindful of that. And one thing that you can do with that too is, we're going to talk about this later, but constant communication with your students. Part of that is ask them what's going on in their other classes. It's completely okay to ask them, how much work do you have in your other classes? About how much time are you spending on it? I used to do that all the time. This is secretly my favorite one. Number 2, assume nothing. Assume absolutely nothing. Assume nothing about how students use their time, about what tools they're using or what they're not using. Assume nothing about their tech access. They might tell you that they have a really functioning computer or that they have strong Wi-Fi or whatever, but maybe they don't. They might tell you that they don't have a printer and maybe they do. Like, just assume absolutely nothing. Assume that they only have what your district is providing them or anything that you can verify. Assume nothing about their home environment. Ask, contact them. This is where communication really comes into play. Ask them. Do not assume what's going on in your student's house, and you as the teacher, it is your responsibility to figure out who is a part of your home environment. And I really recommend that you send out a type of teacher survey that asks students exactly what their home environment looks like. Like maybe they're sharing a computer with somebody at home. That's really common. I also learned this lesson the hard way with assume nothing, that I assumed during quarantine that a lot of my students would have time to work on their schoolwork because everything was shut down. False. My students are high schoolers, and so they actually picked up a lot of extra work shifts since they weren't at school. That's a big deal. I need to know that when it comes to assigning due dates, because that is a part of equity. If I have a working student population, then I need to respect that. That's not something I'm going to say that, you know, academics come first. I'm going to respect that. So it's really important that we understand exactly. Oh, thank you so much, guys. Yay, I can see your comments. I'm really excited about this. Thank you, Aileen. You're awesome. Make sure that you understand exactly what your students are going through as much as you can by just asking and communicating with them. Don't assume. Don't assume. But I want you to know that when it comes to the tools that they're using, hilarious. But we know as world language teachers the dangers of Google Translate. So I will tell you that the best way to avoid this, I know that we have the most perfect, beautiful baby angels in the world. You and I both know that, right? But they're having a hard time right now. So more than your average number of students are going to have Google Translate open on another browser while they're doing your work. They are. So what you need to do is establish really strong ground rules with them about what's okay and what's not okay to use. And as soon as you catch it, ask them to return the work with their own words. It works a lot better than getting them in trouble. Trust me, just ask them to resubmit until it's their own words, because you'll be able to tell. And the other thing is too, that if you choose resources that are mostly input based, that ask a lot of questions and don't ask for a lot of writing, then, or what I mean by that is that the students are producing a lot of language, so not specifically just writing, that you can eliminate a lot of those problems. So I figured that one out quickly. I used to do a lot of free writes with students when I was in class with them, right? But that was definitely harder to pull off in a virtual environment. So I figured a way around that by controlling the amount of language that my students were putting into resources and making them more about input and responding to input. So assume nothing. So I got a lot of Google Translate hardcore. Oh, this one's important. Depending on what you're getting set up with at the beginning of the year, it's really important that you test all of your materials, even if it's from textbook, even if it's from your district, all of that. I had a very negative experience with an online textbook portal that I thought was going to be a beautiful solution for my students, even though I wasn't really a fan of the textbook because I'm not really a textbook teacher when it comes to world language. That's why I created my own curriculum. But the online portal itself looked pretty promising, right? Because I mean, well, hey, we only had 3 days notice. So here's the online portal for virtual learning. Sounds good. But I assumed that all the students would have all of their proper logins because it was already preloaded onto their computers. So I thought, this is going to be great. This is where you need to learn from me. I did not test that out, and I assigned it to all of my students, and it was a total disaster. And the customer service was very, very poor with that service. So I ended up just cutting it. It was so miserable. I ended up being in IT for a while. So learn from that mistake, even if it's something that your district provides you or a textbook or any kind of like publisher released thing, it doesn't matter. Test it out. Like before I went live on this video, I tested this out 3 times because I'm using a new program to make sure that everything worked. Ask yourself, have your students used this before multiple times, not just once? And do they have all their logins? We'll talk more about that later, but make sure that they have that. And I'm just going to put in a special plug here for Fluency Matters because that is the real deal and she is the real goddess. She saved all of us during virtual learning. That program was beautiful and amazing. And it also did work better for my students because I was able to test the login process before I gave it to all of them. So use specialized programs that you know are going to work well, if possible. Rule number 4 related to this is it's spreadsheet season. You know you need one. You know you need one. Any tool that you use, I don't care if you feel weird about it, you need a full spreadsheet with all of your student login and info. Or you can do a Google form and it'll make the spreadsheet for you. That's really easy. But I know you might feel weird about having their passwords on your computer, but don't worry about it. You're not being all big brother. Like, don't even worry about it. It's really important that you have this. You know why? Because it's going to put you at ease and the students. The students feel really good knowing that their teachers have their passwords. I've had multiple students tell me that. So even though it might feel like there's, you know, you're really feeling icky about having their passwords, you know, there might be 1 or 2 students who are like, do I have to give you my password? And you say, no, that's okay. Just make sure you write it down somewhere. But more than that, we'll be glad that you're keeping it for them because they have 14 other passwords for their 8 other classes. So keep them. It's going to save your life. Trust me. Keep them in a spreadsheet. Number 5 is related. It's tutorial season. This is easier than you think it is. Just because Gen Z is on TikTok doesn't mean that they know how to use your tech program. So don't assume. Back to rule number 2. Remember that rule? Assume nothing. It's going to save so much time and effort on your part, especially with stuff that you don't want to do. We are here to talk about you and your sanity, okay? You do not want to be doing the whole IT game at the beginning of the year. So eliminate as much of this as possible by spending a few hours front loading your tutorials. And honestly, it probably won't even take you that long. But as soon as you pick the systems that you like, go ahead and throw on a screen recorder. And I'm going to tell you later some of the ones that I use. I recommend Loom. Loom is really easy to use. But we're going to talk more about this in the course I'm going to share with you later. But this is going to eliminate a lot of IT emails, because as soon as that email comes in, because they don't read the directions, they don't. Even if they do read the directions, it's probably skimming, because they have a lot of other classes with a lot of other detailed directions to read too, okay? Their little baby eyes are tired, okay? It's not because they don't love you. They're just tired of looking at a screen. They're not gonna read your directions as thoroughly as you made them. So they're gonna ask you, how do I use this thing again? Boom, I got you. Send you a video. Easy, done. This one's for real. Sorry, y'all. No, they're not going to watch the videos. They're not. Maybe 20% of your students will. And the reason I need to say this is because I cannot tell you how many times during the whole space of virtual learning, with everything else going on in the world, with just the sheer amount of heaviness that we have experienced at a global community, there were many teachers who were just absolutely disheartened by the lack of participation in their classes, in their grading process, and with students interacting with their content. And I need you to get real for a second about why this upsets you so much. First, though, let's look at it from a student's perspective. They have multiple classes. They're getting multiple videos, and they're getting multiple overloads of screen time and information, plus the weight of everything going on in our world right now. It doesn't say anything about you that they're not watching the videos. So if you spend 3 hours making this gorgeous video on Powtoon with captions and animations and all this beautiful, clear, crisp input and all of these funny jokes that you and your students only know because they've been in your classes, and then you get upset because only 20% of your students are watching it, I'm going to say that a lot of that content exists out there in the world already. And there's a good portion of it that is for free. And we as teachers have a really damaging habit, myself included. I used to do this, so I know where you're coming from. But if you attach personal value to the time you put into the resource, you're doing yourself and your students a disservice, especially during virtual learning. Think about it this way. If you got that same video that took you 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon to make during your school year, or maybe even your summer, if you made all this stuff during your summer, if you got that video from somewhere else because your district purchased it for you, or maybe you even bought it, does that mean that you love your students any less because you got the resource from somewhere else and you didn't pour all that time into making it? No. The time that you spend on your lessons and your content does not prove to your students that you love them. The quality does. So please let this idea go. I cannot tell you how much better I taught and how much better my lessons got and the overall quality of my pedagogy when I realized that my students did not care where my stuff came from. And no, they did not care how much time I spent on things or how hard it was to make something, because it only takes me maybe 15 or 20 minutes to make a video, where it took other teachers down the hall like 3 or 4 hours to do the same thing just because I happen to be good at technology. So it's impossible for that time differential to have anything to do with how much I love my students, right? If I spend 15 minutes on something and it's a good resource and I put it in front of my students, or if somebody else spends 4 hours on it, the only thing that's different about that is not the amount of love or care that we have in our profession. It's honestly just how you got the content and the time it took you to get there. That's it. You will be a happier teacher, a more effective teacher, and your students will get better content when you realize this, because you'll be able to make better choices for yourself and for your students. This year is going to ask so much of you. It is going to ask and ask and ask. It already has. It already has. So don't put that extra pressure on yourself, that if you do just that little bit more, if you just skip that one extra dinner with so-and-so to make that whatever that you think your kids really need, and then you get all upset because they don't watch it, it's not on your kids. It's on you. This one's important too. When it comes to systems, choose 2 to 3 programs at a time. This is going to help you so much when it comes to saving your time and your sanity. So revisit your goals. As stated earlier, my main goal for you is to be a joyful, sustainable, and still excellent teacher in the classroom. That is the whole world of everything that I do. So I'm going to give you some real hard truths. That's what I do. This is one of them. You're going to get tempted, or maybe you're going to even get asked officially by your district to work with like 5 or 6 different things. Try to shave it down to 2 or 3, because I want you to revisit your goals. What are you really trying to work with? Reading, speaking, writing, or listening? And that's going to change every day, right? Or maybe even every few weeks. I want you to view any new system that you're working with through that thought lens. And please only choose what works for your goals. Only choose what works for your goals. You might see something that works really well for one goal and another thing that works partially for another. Choose the thing that works really well for that one goal. You can always add new things later, but don't overload. Speaks for itself. Grace before grades. When you know your students and when you communicate with them well and often and meaningfully, you'll be able to understand and differentiate between students that are truly struggling and students that just aren't giving the effort that they need to, and they need that extra push and accountability. But in all situations, grace before grades. Now, this does not mean that we lower standards for students. It just means that we give them lots of chances to be successful, lots of chances to meet that standard. So it's not the same thing as lowering standards. It's giving students lots of chances to meet that very high standard. Also, the idea of grace before grades means that you're going to need to spend a lot of time working on the mental health of your students, on giving them space to express what's going on in their world and to talk about all of the really hard things that we need to talk about this year. Give them grace. Give yourself grace too. And this one is really going to get you there. Communication will always supersede technology. When it comes to virtual learning, a lot of what the resources that are presented to you have to do with the different technologies that are going to be available to you. But honestly, at the end of the day, Communication is more important than the tech that you choose to use. Do you have a method of constant communication with students? Constant communication with stakeholders will get you to your goal faster than any tech tool. You could pick the coolest resources that are out there. You could have the best pedagogy on the face of the flippin' earth, but if you are not communicating with your students and you don't know what's going on individually in their household, it's not going to go very well for you because you're going to be disconnected from what's going on in each individual learning environment. The unique thing about virtual learning is that we are now working with, if you're a high schooler, 150 different virtual learning environments, right? So we need to keep a pulse on every single one of them. You need a good system for communication with your students. That's going to be more important than choosing whatever technology platform that you work with. So the reason I'm mentioning this is that the system that you choose, this one for communication, it's far more important than what you actually use to deliver your lessons, because nobody's going to be listening to your lessons if they don't know that you care, and nobody's going to be listening to your lessons if you're not reminding them for what they need to be doing. Also, keep in mind that when it comes to communication, like this is a big one for equity. Systems are going to promote equity in your school environment far more than individual actions will. So you need to set this one up really well. What are your communication protocols with students and parents? Does it make sure that the most vulnerable populations that you have are given a ton of extra love and attention? That needs to be looked at, and that needs to be talked about in your school more than exactly what program or virtual learning protocol that you have. Communication needs to go above technology. It really does. And you're going to get to that point, of course, as a teacher, this is the part where we're talking about you, where it's going to be 3 o'clock and you're not going to have a lot of time left in your virtual day or in your day at school, right? You have so many extra responsibilities this back to school season. So we have to be ruthless about what we choose to do and what we choose not to participate in. So if it comes down to the wire, you're about to grab your bag and go, you got 30 minutes left. When in doubt, choose communication. If you only have 30 minutes left and you got to choose between copies or making lesson plans or assigning something on Google Classroom, choose communication. Check in with one of your students. I promise you that will go way further than any other measure that you can do. It's so important. And it is way more important than it ever was before. It also takes a lot more time than it used to. So give it the time that it needs and cut off other things if you need to. Consistency. This is the last one. We're going to drive it home here, y'all. Consistency will always move over complexity. If you are part of the really cool community of teachers who is just so over the moon about their students that they're ready to do whatever they need to make virtual learning engaging, you're a hero and I love you. Being constantly in touch with your students though, and having a system in place where you can meet with them and grade their work and all of that good stuff that has to do with having a good system in place, that is going to beat having a Bitmoji classroom any day of the week. Even though I love Bitmoji classrooms and I think they're so cool, do it second. Make sure that you have this consistency thing done first because they're freaking awesome. Also, I think escape rooms are probably one of the best options that you have for virtual learning. But what I'm seeing is that everybody's talking about, like, what is my escape room going to look like and how am I going to do it? But nobody's going to go log into your escape room if you're not constantly in touch with them about, like, this is when it's due. Like, this is the system that I have for when I'm going to grade it. So when in doubt, make sure that you have all of that consistent communication down. Let's go over everything that we talked about here. So we've got, what are your goals? Assign less, test all of your materials, assume nothing. It's totally spreadsheet season. Make sure you get all those passwords locked in. It's tutorial season. Make sure that you're recording absolutely everything. They're not going to watch all the videos and they're not going to read all of your directions. So make sure that you're really clear about what is the most crucial thing and that you're pretty ruthless with your time about what you choose to spend. Choose 2 to 3 programs that you think are going to work really, really well for you. Grace before grades. Communication is always going to beat out tech, and consistency over complexity. Even though complexity is really cool and I'm into it, but choose consistency when you can. I hope that you absolutely love this class and that you can get something out of it. Maybe not all of these are going to apply to you in the specific situation that you got, but you got at least something that's going to work for you in whatever model that you are walking back into the classroom with. So I know you're probably thinking to yourself, well, what's next? Here's what's next. You know you need in on this. What I showed you today is just one lesson of one module out of 10 that you'll get if you decide to join me in Practical Proficiency, which is my baby. It is the most amazing thing. It is so chock full of life and energy because it is everything to support the world language teachers in what is going to be the toughest year to teach world language. And I want to help guide you through this challenging time with something that's going to make sure that you are working on the right things at the right time. So here's what we're going to be talking about in here. These are the 9 elements of the modern world language classroom, and we're going to be doing an in-depth module on each of these trainings that you see here. The one that we just did today is just the intro model to everything that we're doing with virtual learning. So there's a lot more than what you saw here. And today is your lucky day because it's the last day to get on the VIP list for an exclusive bonus of, yeah, you see that there, a curated curriculum set, which is totally a $45 value. So make sure that you get on this list. How do you do that? Go to that link, lalibrelanguagelearning.com/proficiency. And I'm going to put it in the comments below so that you can get in on it. Again, that's lalibrelanguagelearning.com/proficiency so that you can get in on this exclusive bonus that's only going to be available until midnight tonight. We start enrollment tomorrow, and I really hope to see you in there for even more of all these trainings. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time.